Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Associated Black Charities signature webinar event, Equity at Work. We're so happy to have all of you join us for today's Lunch and Learn, where we're going to talk and learn all about corporate social responsibility. Corporate social responsibility, abbreviated often as CSR, is a crucial aspect of modern business behavior. It drives organizations to actively contribute to the well-being of society and their communities and the environment and people. By integrating corporate social responsibility into their operations, businesses are known to strengthen their brand, their image, but also they begin to play an essential role in addressing very pertinent and important and crucial social issues. So today we're going to talk about corporate social responsibility, but also in the context of what it can do meaningfully to benefit Black professionals and Black workers. How can corporate social responsibility begin to prioritize initiatives that address systemic racism, systemic inequities, and the disparities that plague our communities? How can they promote career advancement for Black professionals and equitable hiring practices and pay equity and all of the things that we've talked about with this webinar series all year long? My name is Chrissy Thornton, and I'm excited to moderate today's Equity at Work webinar session. And I would love to introduce you to the wonderful panel of professionals with expertise that we have joining us today. And I would ask them at this time to join me on camera.
Hello there, Christy. How are you?
Hello, wonderful, wonderful. We're going to ask everyone to join us on camera, and we're going to go ahead and get started with today's conversation. And today with us, we have some expertise that we're excited to have people share their expertise with us. And we would love for each of you to introduce yourselves. Tell us as much about yourself as you want us to know for today's conversation. And also talk a little bit about why this discussion is important and why you feel uniquely qualified to teach us today about corporate social responsibility. And we're going to start with Jeanette. Welcome to Equity at Work.
Good afternoon, Chrissy. Thanks for having me today. Hi, Mr. Taylor.
Hello there.
It's an honor to be here. My name is Jeanette Gonzalez Graham. I'm the founder and executive director of No Struggle, No Success. It is a statewide reentry program for the state of Maryland where we reduce mass incarceration. Actually, in the last, 20 days, maybe 45 days, 11 individuals came home from prison where they served life or sentencing. And so we try to make sure that their preventive care and empowerment for themselves and their family across Maryland, that they do not return back to prison either. My role in the Justice Impact communities is to make sure that they have privileges just like everyone else, and that their issues that they're having, that we advocate across state laws, and especially as they reintegrate back in the community around employment. And it's very important for us to have this freedom of discussion today around the corporate social responsibility, where there's powerful tools where we can advance. I know I've been in corporate America for 23 years, and hair was an issue. My last name was an issue. Being a single mother was an issue. Facing disaster issues, all these things that I wanted to be able to get up and go to work and pay my bills, but my employers didn't see me for who I was. And didn't have a voice in that. And there's some actionable responses when it comes to money, when it comes to employee rights, and when it comes to personal matters that affects our professional lives. I know as a Black woman, I don't have the same work-life balance as a white woman. And so all these things matter to me. And that's why I do the community engagement opportunities for my own employees. And I make sure that as an employer and as a leader, that I don't resemble anything of what I experienced in my past. So it's an honor to be here and then join into the discussion.
So excited to learn from you today. And Mr. Taylor, Ronald, thank you for joining us. We'd love to hear more about you and why you believe this conversation is so important.
Certainly. So I'm Ron Taylor. I am the CFO and COO for Atlas Institute. We are a nonprofit that provides services for adults with intellectual developmental disabilities. My role has been one that has really focused not just on ensuring that we are economically sound as an organization, but that we are fighting for the rights for the clients that we serve, often individuals that don't have their own voice, as well as the fact that 90% of my employees are minorities. And I recognize, just as we were listening a moment ago, Janelle talked, many individuals don't have the same work-life balance. Many individuals don't have the opportunity to enjoy a comfortable wage that can move them in the right direction from a sustainability standpoint. So our organization is one that really focuses in on equity and inclusion. We focus on ensuring that we are looking at the things that impact the clients that we serve, as well as the employees that we have. We recognize the fact that in many instances, the things that we do aren't only impacted by our day-to-day activities, but they're impacted by the vendors that we interact with. And so we are always trying to push to ensure that the vendors that we interact with have a very similar view, so that not only are we a voice, but there is a partnership with our vendors that we're providing services and support with.
So it really is, it sounds like it's a comprehensive view of how an organization shows up, how it behaves, the choices it makes, and all of those things. And I would like to now introduce you all and give her really an opportunity to introduce herself to my colleague, Amber Merrick. She and I have been having this conversation wanting to learn more. And so I invited her in to join the dialogue. So Amber, introduce yourself to the audience today and talk a little bit about why you are excited to talk about corporate social responsibility.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Chrissy, for inviting me to the conversation. So I'm definitely super excited to talk about corporate social responsibility because, as we know, privilege is not something that you earn, but it is something that gives you a responsibility. And our corporate entities, because we live in a capitalist society, have that responsibility to actually reach back and do something for those who don't have the same opportunities and access to resources. So I'm really excited about how we can gather around this topic and conversation.
All right, so let's dive right in. First, if you're watching with us today, feel free to contribute. We want you to ask your questions of our panelists, Ronald and Jeanette. We want you to share your journeys and your expertise and lived experiences in the chat. If you have any questions, let us know. We want you to be engaged and involved. So I'm going to ask our two guests to just tell us, what is corporate social responsibility, right? Like, we have these buzzwords and phrases that everybody latches onto. At the end of the day, what really is it? How would you define it?
You want me to start first, Ron?
Sure.
You okay with that? Okay. So my understanding, my background in it, I understand it to be able to have a platform where we can bridge those gaps of opportunity, ensuring that there's economic stability and self-sufficiency while they do their, while they're able to get mentorship, they're able to get training, they're able to get certain things that they can have while they work in their role. Also believe that this CSR strategies also includes investment into community well-being.
Absolutely. Your thoughts, Ron?
Sure. So when I think about, corporate social responsibility, I think it really focuses on a model of how companies integrate, social, environmental, as well as ethical considerations in the way that they do business, the way that they provide support services, i.e., in my instance, to our clients that we serve, as well as our stakeholders. I often look at CSR is kind of divided up into those four key areas: environmental responsibility, social responsibility, ethical practices, and then economic responsibilities. And that last one, that economical responsibility, I think is always important for us as minorities, because as we always know, it's harder for us. It's harder for us to get a seat at the table, to ensure that we're being compensated fairly. And then when I think about it from an entrepreneurial standpoint, many of our small minority-owned businesses really struggle being able to get the right type of contracts, being able to have a seat at the table so that they can grow and show their area of expertise. So for me, it's a combination of how you mirror and merge all four of those issues together so that you are having the right impact, not just today, but you're setting up a sustainable process for the future.
So that's very informative. I have a follow-up question to you all, and Amber, feel free to kind of come into the conversation too. Is that what businesses are made for? You know, we know there are such things as social enterprises, right? And they are by design meant to solve society's problems, to be anchors of support in the areas that you mentioned with economic responsibility and environmental concern and a giving model. We see a lot of organizations and businesses talking about doing good, but is that what a business should be focused on? Is that a core business strategy? And is it about doing good, or is it a strategy that positions them to look like they care about doing good?
So for me, I've seen those organizations where they look like they're doing good. I've been in many board meetings as an executive assistant, and I'm taking meeting minutes, and I'm like, I live in this community. I know you guys not helping in this community, right?
Mhm.
I've seen employees where they can take off of their cat, but I had a house fire, and I didn't get the same support. And I'm sitting here looking at the employee benefits and compensations and all those things, and none of it is adding up to me and versus my white colleague. So when I see these things, they have these missions and these values and all these um, slogans of wanting to say that they do good, but they actually not even taking care of their own when they
Right.
pull these people in. And I used to work at this local hospital, and I came to them for services for disability related to a child, and I couldn't afford the assessments. And the vice president said, if we can't help you, how can we help outsiders?
Mhm.
And I was like, that's a good point. And I think um, when you do have a business and when you do have the idea of being sustainable and following a mission and operation, it definitely needs to make sure that it has the impact that starts with the employees first.
Mhm.
It
Any other
definitely.
thoughts?
Christy, when I think about your question, yeah, I think without a doubt there is that novelty of, is it the responsibility of a business or corporation to think about the social aspect of what goes on in society? And I will tell you, being in the workforce for more than 35 years now, when I first came into my very first job, I say businesses did not care. Businesses really were of the mindset, we're here to make money for our shareholders, and that's the only thing we were responsible for. I think over the last 10 to 20 years, there has been a small shift in organizations recognizing that we have to put our money where our mouth is. We have to put our mission where our mouth is. And where we talk about, we hear many organizations talk about our people are our greatest asset. And if they aren't doing something to ensure that those individuals feel supported, not just from yes, I have the right computer, yes, I have a parking space, but yes, what are the things that I need to say that, yes, as I separate from my personal life to come in and give my 8, 10, 12 hours a day, how can I do that without having to worry about, can I keep my lights on? Do I have the same opportunities for advancement that my peers do? And so I think many organizations have to start saying, yes, how do we develop our employees so that they can grow within our corporate structure? How do we make sure that the policies that we have, they're being implemented equitably, regardless of race, gender, or any other demographic, so that everyone feels that they're being supported through this whole process called work? If all we do is come, earn a paycheck, and go home, we create a scenario that there is no sustainability, there's no loyalty, there's no long-term growth for me as an employee or this organization. Because when I walk away, that institutional knowledge that I have that has helped build this organization, it goes with me. But if I am an integral part and I feel like that, I'm here for the long haul and I really can have a positive impact so that we continue to grow me personally as well as the organization.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So Amber, you have some thoughts?
Yeah, I was thinking, and Mr. Taylor used a really good word, that sustainability. I'm thinking if you don't have happy or healthy employees, you have liabilities on your hands. That's a high turnover rate. They're not going to come be productive for you. And like he said, their productivity goes out of the door, and that sustainability, and you have to start over and over and over and over again. But is honestly better for your bottom line to invest in the people who work for you.
So I'm gonna get to the question that's in the chat, but first I want to talk about best practices. So when this is done well and right, what does it look like? What are the components of social responsibility done well? Like what has to be in place for it to be purposeful?
I think it's important that employers that want to have sustainability and want to make the profit that they want to make, that they partner with organizations like No Struggle No Cess or like Associated Black Charities that can help create co-solutions to tailor to the needs of undeserved populations, and or justice impact individuals that come into their workforce. I think that they need to embed the understanding of that work-life balance. How does it play a part of their mission and their operation, protocols and procedures? I think that they need to measure things for long term that will pour into the communities and transform ways that not only that they get their revenue, but it pours in where they don't have to outsource things, that they can actually grow those other employees into those roles that continue helping them as successors. There's a need for to enhance equity across the board for every role there, and share in that responsibility to enhance that compassion across society and workforce development.
I love you mentioned equity, and I love to hear from our other two contributors, but we'll circle back to equity because that's super important.
Sure. I think adding to that, when we think about ensuring that an organization recognizes the benefit of supporting community development, supporting education of employees as well as non-employees, because there is a benefit when you have the ability to train individuals that may not otherwise have an opportunity to learn certain skills. It creates, the opportunity for us to have an impact that is unmeasurable. Making sure that there is fair treatment of employees and suppliers, because it really just creates a positive cycle, if you will. I then also think about making sure that an organization upholds transparency, fighting corruption when it's seen, and then really just ensuring that there are ethical labor practices, internal as well as external, and then trying to figure out what can we do as a organization to create economic development through job creations, through promoting fair trade. All of those things have to exist for there just to be that circle, that cycle, if you will, of growth, empowerment, sustainability. So I think, Christy, to your question, making sure that we as leaders are trying to make sure that exists in the way that we do business.
So Amber, think about this, and others think about this. In most corporations, whether they're mid-size or large-scale corporations, there's hierarchy, and there's somebody at the top who has the benefit and privilege of having their proclivities matter. And so where we talk about corporate social responsibility being effective when it considers the community, when it considers the consumer base, when it considers the internal employees and their interests and their needs, and when it considers equity, there are a lot of times that organizations might be doing corporate social responsibility well, but what they do may follow the values, the belief system, and the interests of the leader. And with not a whole lot of Black individuals and professionals in those CEO seats, sometimes you'll see corporations sitting in a city like Baltimore, maybe even, and you figure they should be advancing the needs of specific communities, but they're overly concerned about something else that has personal meaning and value to the leader. What do we think about that?
So that one, I think that your comment is dead on. Yeah, the personality and the interests of the individual sitting at the top are always, or at least in many instances, going to direct the strategy of an organization. And one of the things that corporations can do is say, hey, how do we create a meaningful strategic plan and make sure that CSR is a part of that? And if a strategic plan is done correctly, you're going to bring in individuals that don't always look like a certain part of your leadership team, but they are representations of the entire organization. And I think when that happens, it gives that opportunity for it not just to be the views and the values of one person, but it can say, hey, how do we look at this from an overall social and equitable standpoint so that the views and needs of our entire society are being addressed?
I love that, right? Like this is about community building through valuing everyone's perspectives, opinions, and contributions. And too often, so I used to run a major fundraising event for the Leukemia Lymphoma Society. And we used to have really major partnerships with corporations who leveraged a lot of resources, a lot of employees, a lot of, uh, donor engagement and all of these things. And we were there in partnership because someone at the top had a child who was mission connected, right? But what that in that partnership at the time is very grateful for it. But what that does is leaves out like an acknowledgement of where the organization sits, who the organization touches and connects with every day. And in some ways, it forces the whole employee base, without their consent, without their agreement, without their excitement or morale around it, to coalesce around an issue that's not theirs. How do we start to have those conversations in ways where we know that that should not be part of the best practice?
I think for me is that professional development and growth, starting at leadership, having a way where there is a true open door policy, where the leaders still can be mentored, where there's development programs, where there are taking advice and taking feedback from those performance annual reviews that you do with your employees, and see if you can establish some form of employee resource groups to make sure that that they're being represented from that role and from their community. I think being able to address those ways to creating a safe working environment that's positive for all employees to be able to sit back and say, okay, because it has affected me. I know why I started my program. And even though I started my program for my personal reasons, I had to listen to those ones that was around me saying what more needed to be done so it can better serve, have longevity and sustainability within my program. And it wasn't just from my heart, leading my organization was just my heart. I had to be open-minded. I had to listen to my board. I had to pick correct board members to do that, volunteers and those kind of things. And that opens up the door for more support and matching more donors and more causes to continue on, because the world is changing so much. And us Black people are really making a stand and advocating for what we want now. And we're backed by it. And the labor practices need to follow.
I agree. And there's a question in the chat. I'd love to give you guys the opportunity to answer. It really talks about how do we, as community members, right, hold companies accountable for upholding who they say they are around corporate social responsibility. And I'd love to hear that in the context of a city like Baltimore that shows up with significant racial and economic disparity. How do we hold them accountable?
Chris, I think the easiest, maybe sometimes not so easy, but I think the easiest way to hold them accountable is with our dollars. Are we being mindful of where we are spending our money? You know, we always hear that in the Black community, the dollar may only go around, twice, where in other communities it will go around, 12, 15 times.
It's at 5 to 6 hours, I heard earlier today
Exactly.
in our
So,
community.
so we've got to recognize that our dollar has power.
Mhm.
And if there is an organization that is not listening to what our needs are from a community standpoint, why should we give them the benefit of our hard-earned money? When I recognize that there is always, oh, but are the other businesses, are they providing the same type of quality? Sometimes they need that opportunity to prove that quality. But clearly, if we have organizations that are counter to our beliefs, to our values, they should not be receiving our money. And we should be very vocal of sharing why we are taking our dollars and sending somewhere else. The silence of not spending in X corporation with X company has an impact, but if we do it with a voice and we make sure that it's purposeful and it's heard, it will actually spark an understanding of other individuals needing to do the exact same thing. So the money, but also our voice.
I love that advocacy, right? And I would love for the people in the chat to tell us, let's have an honesty moment here. Who post-election or, in modern, political landscape has made hard decisions? I know for me, I have said no more Walmart. I've said no more Chick-fil-A, although that one is hard. I was all the way in the drive-through one time and my son was like, I thought you said, what Chick-fil-A? I was like, oh, Lord. How many of us are willing to make those kind of sacrifices on principle? And how many of us understand the impact of all of us needing to kind of stand on whatever your values are? So maybe those corporations don't assault what you believe in, but where do you land on these organizations that have pulled out of DEI, have aligned with racist rhetoric? Are we still supporting them, or are we looking for the counterparts that have really solid corporate social responsibility?
Big one.
Can I go back to the question in the chat? It says, as leaders of organizations that champion the rights and needs of marginalized communities, how can other community members actively contribute to holding companies accountable? And I think it goes to education. Like, as leaders of these organizations, we have to educate our other community members about why shopping at Target versus Walmart is important. We get the list that says, don't shop here anymore, but how many people actually knows why? How many people know why that's a good idea? How many people know the stats about how much the Black dollar gets circulated? And then if we do have Black-owned businesses that we would prefer to patronize, how do we give them the resources to make the quality better? Like, how do we teach them better customer service or quicker turnaround? How do we volunteer because they might not be able to scale up yet to get the orders out faster? I think we have to be active in the ecosystem in order to move forward. Like, we can't just say, don't shop there no more, figure it out. Like,
No,
how do
that's
we
where I'm at.
create solutions?
But
And you know what? I
understand.
haven't gone to Chick-fil-A since like the first time.
Oh,
The
really?
first,
Okay. So you were
yeah,
hardcore.
yeah, and whatever little points I had left over, I used those, but not any real dollars.
Yeah.
Same thing with Starbucks. If you give me a gift card, I'll use it, but I'm not giving them my money.
Yeah.
I like the fact that in the question of being accountable, I think along with supporting the education is that transparency and the communication behind it. It's allowing keeping as a leader, keeping the employees informed about the business goals and what we're doing when it comes to CSR initiatives. Encouraging to be open to communication when collaborating with community organizations. When there is a town hall, when there are feedback sessions, employees should join those sessions, give that feedback, and then follow up with your supervisor or senior staff and say, well, we gave this feedback. Are we implementing this in the new fiscal year? Is there a budget? Do we need to do any additional fundraising activities? What can we do to make sure that these things happen for our employees? I think also and making sure that the leaders stay committed to the decision making to support the employees through that process, because they do have, I always tell my employees, at the end of the day, give me all the feedback. Give me exactly what makes sense to you, because ultimately you got to do this work. But they know my name, but I have to say I'm backed up by my team. And if I'm not supporting my team, my employees, then or giving them the credit and giving them the skill set and the tools that they need, then I'm gonna lose them, and I'm gonna lose the quality of the mission of my program and my organization. So I think it's very important to have eco friendly practices, and also uh the initiatives that falls behind those things. I think follow up is very important. Advocating. If you want me to work here, if I'm interviewing for a job, I'm looking, of course, at the pay, but I'm looking at those other things that affect my life and how I can evolve so I can continue growing up the corporate ladder if that's where I'm going, and what my employee and what my supervisors are doing from the beginning to end. These are my colleagues.
So in the chat, it says social media has definitely pulled back the curtain on words, brands, and organizations that aren't following what they are saying they are committed to as far as corporate social responsibility. And a lot of times someone asked, is there a working list? I've seen a couple of them floating around. You know, at one time, the NAACP was very active in issuing travel bans to organizations specifically that weren't safe for Black consumers, Black patrons. But, you know, one thing that we do is talk about the organizations that we won't support. And maybe the conversation, and you all weigh in, should switch more to who's doing it well and right. Because there are also a lot of corporations that land in the middle who have performative things in place, but aren't really taking a stand either way. What do you think about that?
I thought Ron was going to speak. I think it's like how you said, is we get these lists and we get these social media posters saying don't go there, but look at who's doing it, or who wants to do it but don't have the resources to get it done. I always say that even when it comes to going after contracts or grants, if I look like someone else, I wouldn't have a problem getting a grant contract, right? But I don't. I know what it feels like to not have fair labor practices done to me, but that other person does not. And I think it's very important to, when we do find employers and organizations that are trying and have made some effort into it, send them a note, let them know that you acknowledged it, and come up with volunteer, have internships, have those community partners step in to further advance that. The more people that advocate on implementing diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, the more that, and see what it really, the impact from it, the better responses and successful outcomes that we can have.
And so,
I think,
go ahead. Yes.
I think Jeanette's point is dead on. You do have to make sure that you are highlighting those organizations that are doing, even if they're not doing it great, but are they at least having a voice? I think that's extremely important. But one of the things I'd like to add to this part of the conversation is recognizing, how do we educate our own on being a part of the process? When I think about my staff and the organizations that work for my organization, I have a lot of individuals, this is their first time job. They are still living at home. They've not branched out into what I call real adulthood yet. And they don't understand some of these issues. And my organization, we have to walk a very thin line to not try to promote one political agenda versus another. But we have also created an opportunity for individuals to have free-flowing conversations. And what I started was something that I learned when I was in, one of the big four accounting firms, creating circles. We call them minority circles, so that individuals that have like nets, for whatever it be, whether it be females, whether it be Black or brown individuals, whether it be Latinos, giving them the opportunity to come together and talk about the issues that are meaningful to them, so that it's happening in a non-political, from the leadership standpoint, but it is allowing them to say, hey, here's what I'm dealing with, and here are the things that I think need to exist. And when we talk about one of the things that we had on the conversation earlier about that strategic planning, we would always take some of the output from these minority circle discussions and say, how do we incorporate that into the way that we do business? And that way, even if individuals don't have a true seat at the table, there's at least a voice. So really making sure that there is a safe place in the local or the workplace, I think is extremely important.
So there are a couple of commonalities for organizations that do this well and who can tout success. One of them is that corporate social responsibility is not separate from the business goals. It is aligned naturally with the mission, with the values of the organization. So it's not something we can pick up and put down. It just becomes very integrated in how the company or organization does business, how they treat their workforce, how they treat the community. Another is being transparent and accountable, talking about when they've hit the mark, when they've missed it, communicating with the stakeholders and building trust in those communities so that it's not performative. It's not something that you're doing during Black History Month, or it's not something that you're doing during Pride Month. And you know, our conversation is focusing on equity, racial equity, and Black people because that's what we do. But there are variations of corporate social responsibility. They're still doing good things in the world that don't focus on, you know, our needs. But I think there are these commonalities in success. Yes, they're focused on inclusion, they're community-centered, and it's integrated in the work. I want to talk a little bit about a few organizations who are known to do it well and love to hear your experience because these are national organizations that people would recognize, but you all may have some local organizations, some Black run or owned, curated organizations that are doing it well too. So the one that surprised me the most when I was doing the research is Target, because we focus so much on not going to Walmart today, right? Which is a hardship, but Target actually showed up as an organization with a significant community investment to racial equity. I didn't know that. It says that they made a $2 billion investment in Black-owned businesses and supplier diversity. That was their goal by next year. That they have programs to increase Black representation in the leadership, which is important, and someone mentioned in chat, and Black representation in their workforce, and community engagement initiatives that focus on disaster relief in underserved neighborhoods and school funding. Who knew that? You knew that?
Yes,
Jeanette?
because yes, they donate gift cards. They allowed us to get care packages for my individuals that come home from prison. And I learned this early on, maybe about 10 or 15 years ago. They've done a lot more in the last, couple of years. But yes, I did know that. Although I tell them all the time, I think Target price is a little bit expensive for me sometimes. I try to get a discount as I can. But
Yeah.
yes, I definitely do. And most of my returning citizens that come home and my board members, they are Target fans. So yes, very much so.
So Microsoft, with their commitment to HBCUs, we have Ben & Jerry's, who has partnered for a long time with the NAACP and their ethical labor practice movement work. Salesforce, who has a model around equity and philanthropy, where they dedicate 1% of the company's time, equity, and their products to improving community. These organizations we don't talk about as much because a lot of times we're talking about why we won't go somewhere else. How do we take the model of those organizations and turn around and support our own through community self-determination? What does it look like? Or are we too under-resourced to have corporate social responsibility? Or is that not for us because we are the marginalized people?
No, we still need to have it. We still need to have it. It enhances our brand and reputation when we do. It sets us different in the market when we do. It allows us to be ahead of the game when it comes to be a competitive. If there's another reentry program that is different from mine, and it also increases my participants' loyalty and their satisfaction and employee retention when we do those things.
Yeah. I think to add to that, your question, Chris, you talked about, is it something that we can do with the limitations that some of our smaller organizations may have just based on capital? And it's not always about what we can do with the resources that we have, but in many instances, what can we do as we partner with other organizations that actually may have the capital to do it? And so reaching out and creating partnerships with the organizations that are doing it well I think is one way to incorporate that into what some of our smaller organizations and businesses may be able to do. And it creates that environment of, yes, we are not a single organization, but collectively we can do a lot more together.
Absolutely.
Any other thoughts, Amber?
No, they're saying all of the things.
I wanted to
someone said
mention one of
1%.
the small businesses, Chrissy.
Oh.
I'm a fan of Truist. Truist has been really good to individuals learning financial literacy and banking, and believe it or not, First National Bank as well, with their grants, with their services and products. So as they become employees or they become entrepreneurs, they understand and have that as well. So I wanted to name that one.
So I just want to reference, someone said in the chat when we were talking about Salesforce, they said 1%, that's all. So Salesforce, not that it shouldn't and couldn't and probably needs to be more. I agree with that. But Salesforce's annual profit is, I just looked it up, approximately $4.1 billion. So 1% is not, we have organizations that are granting ABC, $500 corporate sponsorships and checking the box on helping Black communities. So, I do think it is a significant investment. Could it, should it, might it possibly deserve to be more? Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know what? I just had a thought. I think that smaller organizations, when they get corporate support, should be louder about it. We should celebrate it more because it's going to make other people require more of those corporations. Like, oh, hey, I heard you did this. Are you still doing that?
Yeah.
And I think it would give them more responsibility to invest in the communities that they serve. I think for me, some of the, like, I love Target and they do have a lot of initiatives, but some of it seems still a little bit elitist. Like you're highlighting Black businesses that have been in business for years and they already have a huge following, and then you put them on your shelves. But what about somebody who's still selling products out of their trunk and they still have to put up a table?
They done put Tabitha Brown over there at Target, so I'm gonna have to dissent on that one.
Yeah, but like Tabitha Brown was already Tabitha Brown when
Yeah,
they went and
you're
got
right.
her.
She had already ascended to who she is.
Yeah.
You're
And
absolutely
so it's
right.
like, how do you literally reach back? Like there was a Target at Mondawmin, and what about the girl who's selling soaps around the corner from Mondawmin?
Yes.
Like, how do we like touch those people as opposed to being like, hey, come buy? Like they're still making a profit. Like they're putting the products on the shelves, but they're still profiting. Like, how do you bring people up as opposed to like finding people who have already ascended?
We've already made it. Let's answer some of the questions in the chat. So one asks, how does your organization safeguard its CSR mission and goals from being co-opted or undermined by groups with conflicting agendas?
Chris, I'll jump in on that one. When I think about what Atlas Institute does, the fact that we recognize that we can't be everything to everyone is important. And so we don't try to go into a scenario of, yes, we're going to change the world all at one time, but we also try to say, how do we recognize the needs of the individuals that sit in our chairs today, whether it be our clients that we support or the employees that we have. And then really making sure that we don't lose sight of the fact that we are a service-driven organization. We have limited funds, we're state supported. And so it's making sure that we invest that money in a way that we know that it's going to give back, as well as making sure that we're not creating a scenario that we are highlighting one group of individuals and not ensuring that other individuals are basically becoming the silent minority. We don't want individuals to feel like they can't have a voice at the table. We want everyone to have that voice. So it's really just making sure that we are purposeful in doing things that support our mission, support our CSR strategies, and they're really just not losing sight of it. And then trying to make sure that we have reporting on those metrics. We always hear the issue. Yeah, we always hear that. Yeah, if you don't report it, you don't have any real insight into the overall effectiveness. And what's reported is what's going to get done. We all hear that in corporate societies. So really making sure that we are trying to measure the impact of what we have. And then if ever we see that measure going down, why? And then what type of additional action need to be put in place so it's meeting the goals that we have.
And impact, even as a word, I think about this often in ABC's work, it's so subjective, right? Because impact on who, right? Because if we are participating in corporate social responsibility, and maybe for the month of July, we went out to communities and organizations and we handed out donuts and we believe we had, incredible impact, but did they need and ask for donuts? Did you survey the community? Did you amplify their voices, their lived experience, and meet them where their need was? And I say that even as a nonprofit organization focused on racial equity that needs the investment of corporations who are socially, responsible and committed to community. But sometimes they will give you what they want to give you and check that impact box. Whether it is a dollar amount, like I'm telling you, I need significant investment to sustain the work in the program. And you're like, here goes your $3,000. And while we're going to ring the bell for it and celebrate it, it wasn't what I needed, right? Or here are coats that we're going to hand out, or here's some sort of transactional thing that we have for you and your community. How do organizations avoid that? How do they start to have real meaningful conversations with the communities and organizations and stakeholders that they say they want to support?
And I think from my understanding with that, go back to the operational side and assess any risk, any risk that could take place in how you do things, ensuring that the ethical practices related to, like legal issues or public backlash, depending on how you do things. And then that way you can proactively address the social environmental challenges that the company is having, and then really taking that feedback to improve the relationship, if it is transactional. If we need these things, find out what we need first. You need to have that lived experience person at that table to be able to say, did you think about those things? We legislative is coming up. Those laws, that feedback needs to sit there. And also ensuring that, the stability, and thinking of the different things that we can do to carve out the footprints and getting those resources when you can't. The only thing I dislike about that is sometimes when it's a predominantly white organization and they have, they do the token thing, let the Black sister go out and say this to the community, and then they check the box off. I think it should be a joint effort, putting people out there that we all can learn from each other, kind of thing. So it takes to have that positive culture and sense of purpose amongst the employees, is to allowing them to share their vision and that social and environment change for that true impact.
So as we're starting to wind down on our time, I see some corporate people on the webinar with us today, listening and hopefully learning from your expertise and your perspectives. If they want to implement corporate social responsibility or improve their corporate social responsibility, what are the steps that they need to take to get there? There are some organizations that have things in place that might not be very impactful. Others might not have a focus on any one thing. And one thing we didn't talk about was oversaturation, right? Like you want to help everybody. So there's no significant investment in any one area. ABC, not for nothing, I spent last year on a tour of for corporate and donor engagement, and my swan song was like, we need someone to be 10 toes down. Who is that? Who's that company, right? Like we love what we, piecing it together in our grassroots way, $5 at a time. But where's our $1 million company investment that says like, we got you, right? And what I said before is that when you have people who are at the top of the organization, they give based on their values and proclivities. So when I look at how does Catholic Charities get $1 million gift, right? How does this organization, Kennedy Krieger, get $1 million gift? Because whoever's sitting at the top is making a decision based on their own value systems, and they're leveraging their influence to do that. But when Black people get to the top, a lot of times we're either too fearful to look out for our own communities, thinking that we'll be categorized as doing the wrong thing. You look at Nick Mosby, who just went out of city council president seat, and he used the opportunity to gift many Black organizations, ABC included, in our region with, grant funding to support their programming. Had it not been for him, his love of Black community, we might not have benefited from that kind of allocation. So how do we deal with that? Like, number one, when we get in the seat, how do we stop closing the gate for one another? And then number two, if we want to put something in place, what are the steps to do that? And I'll let each of you comment on that as part of your closing remarks today.
Well, Christy, I think I'm sorry, Jeanette, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was writing notes and I wrote care, listen, gather data, and make a plan. That's how corporations can be more intentional and not just giving us what you want us to have, but you have to care about what we're saying. You have to listen, like actually listen to understand, gather the data, like keep those metrics and build a plan from there. And then as far as closing the door and gatekeeping, I think we just have to, once again, educate, and we have to be brave. Like we have to know that we all can eat and we're going to eat more together than we are individually. It's not a scarcity mindset, but we'll be able to not only survive, but thrive together.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Christy, I think one of the most important things to do is create the right relationships. You're right that yes, when individuals get a seat at the table, are they doing the right thing to ensure that CSR is a part of that mission and that strategy? But I think organizations have to be able to say, we already have a relationship with X organization. We understand what X community needs because we have individuals that are sharing with us what those needs are. We have organizations and companies and vendors that are talking about what they're doing, and they're asking us to become a part of their process. So that relationship building, and for lack of a better term, that networking, I think is a big part of how you're going to get some of the larger organizations to really become more engaged in CSR, and specifically more engaged with CSR that benefits Black, brown, and other minorities.
Amen. Thank you.
Yeah, I think for me, it's collaboration, ensuring that everyone has that unity and that bond, and that there are gifts and talents and education and experiences that all can be at the same table to make sense across the board in that community that you serve and employees. When you have true collaboration and that, like Amber said, everybody can eat. Definitely everyone can eat. Is enough work that can be done that we all can be fulfilled and have a level of justice and equity across the board.
Well, I just would like to thank all of you for sharing your perspectives and your expertise. This is a conversation that could go on much longer, but I learned a lot today, and hopefully our audience, our viewing audience did too, and we're engaged with this wonderful conversation. So thank you for that. I will say I have to breathe a sigh of relief because it is December, which means that we have done 12 Equity at Work webinar sessions this year that I'm very proud of, but also ready to turn the corner, and we start right back up in January. So if you are watching with us today, we've already released the topics for our January series, our 2025 series. And if you're somebody who has expertise to contribute on any of the topics that we're going to cover, please lean in. It's super important that people hear from one another. This is also, in a way, how we start to build networks and build relationships, right? And start to leverage what we know and share it with other people. So with that, I would like to thank all of you for joining us today. In January, our first topic of 2025, which is ABC's 40th anniversary year, is the impact of AI and automation on equity in the workplace. So I'm excited to talk about that. And as always, I am Chrissy Thornton for Associated Black Charities. Have a good rest of your day.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.